movement where local experts in the scientific community will come and speak about their research, and it's encouraged that you ask questions and make comments. It's all good. We're here really to learn about what's going on at IU in this scientific community. Since we started last fall, we've had some pretty great talks, everything from antimatter to climate change in Bloomington, and so it's really been interesting to be a part of this group. So I encourage you to come out and check us out every once in a while when you see the flyers. Talks coming up include Jürgen Scheib, who works on the Mars rover Curiosity, and he'll be coming and talking about his work because he's actually on the scientific team analyzing some of the data coming off that rover. So that's going to be interesting. And then later on in the winter we have Colin Allen, who will be talking about building moral machines. So some interesting things coming up.
One more talk that's not happening until April, but it's about nitrogen pollution that comes from right here and sort of over out more west in Illinois, and how that nitrogen goes down and is causing the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, and sort of the science behind the agricultural system in America and the impacts it's having on the globe.
Great. Interesting. Okay, so tonight we have Dr Castronova, who will be speaking to us on virtual economies. And when I was a kid, I was really into finding other worlds, watching Star Trek and all that stuff, and dreamed about first contact and what an alien world would be like. But we've actually created a whole galaxy of virtual worlds in cyberspace with their own cultures and politics and economies. And so today, Dr Castronova will be talking about that. So let's welcome him.
All right, well first I'd like to get a sense of how many people are actually here for this talk and want to participate in it. How many? Okay, so, all right, because I'm going to be asking you to do some work, okay? And the work you're going to have to do is in groups of about 4. So those of you who have wandered in as individuals, you're just going to have to get to know somebody and get together in groups of 4 for this activity that I have planned. Now, the subject matter for today's talk is virtual economies and virtual money and things like that. So let me just show you this. This is a virtual currency. And that's all I have to say about that topic. You can go well on that, and I'm ostensibly an expert on that subject, and that's really the most essential thing, so why go on and on? I also study games. Games are very important to me, and I think they are far more forward-looking and important in our time than let's say, cyberspace. It's not so much the technology, it's what we're doing with the technology. And we are playing games. And so I'm regularly asked to talk about how games can be used to help education. And how can games be used to solve social problems like U.S. agriculture and the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. How can we communicate? How can we use games to da-da-da? And from where I sit, this often comes across to me as if I am the only architect in the world, and there are people knocking on the door saying, wow, these buildings that I keep hearing about are the most amazing things in the world. Now, I myself don't go into buildings, because when I was a kid, I went into buildings, but I gave that up. I live in the wild now. But I've heard that games are the most important. So it's sort of a bugbear of mine that we have so many people interested in games, and when you look at their game literacy, people spend a lot of time worrying about whether they've watched the right movies and whether they've listened to the right music. and whether they've read the right books. And have they read just enough Shakespeare or too much or not enough? And then they say, well, I played golf for the 864,000th time yesterday, and I haven't played any other game in 10 years other than Candyland with my kids. So as a defender of games as an art form, and also a really important science thing, I feel like this is an evangelical moment for me. Now, in the spirit of that, I would like to say that I hate lectures. I hated listening to them. I hate giving them. And so I would propose that I would stop talking at you. And now I'll just do something, and then you can walk away and go talk to your friends and say, what the hell did that guy mean with that thing that he did with us? Okay? And I do mean something that I hope is reasonably profound, and you're all smart enough to figure out what it is. So we need groups of 4, okay? At least 4. So come on. This is a group of 2. They cannot be. One over here. That cannot be back there. That has to stop being. That's 3 individual people, and it has to become groups of others. You're handicapping yourself. I would prefer there be at least 1 or 2 more over there. So at least 4. Over there. Now, we need 1 person from each team to come and get your equipment. This is a game and it's competitive. Okay? Here for equipment. So each person who's getting equipment needs to get the following thing. 10 strands of spaghetti. Yeah, you have to get 10 strands of spaghetti. No, for the whole table.
So, 1 table?
Yes, 1 table, 10 strands of spaghetti. 1 yard of string. So those should be cut to be approximately 1 yard of tape. Yes, you could do a group of 5. At least 4, you know. So, spaghetti, tape, string, and a marshmallow. Spaghetti, tape, string, and a marshmallow. This is science, I swear to God. So, this is an exercise called, it is a building exercise. It's called the Marshmallow Challenge. The Marshmallow Challenge. And you win the Marshmallow Challenge, ladies and gentlemen, by building a tower that stands, that doesn't fall over. And the person who has, the team that has the highest tower wins. Okay? The thing is, your tower has to have the marshmallow on it. And it can't fall over with the marshmallow on it. You can't have the marshmallow as the base. The marshmallow has to be up in the air somewhere. And the winner...
Damage the marshmallow.
No, you can't take apart the marshmallow. Then it would be glue, wouldn't it?
Can we take apart anything else?
Yes, everything else is completely free to be destroyed. This is my loot bag that when I do games in classes, students get to delve in the loot bag. So there's hats in there, and folders, and my own custom-made Bayo tapestry bookmarks. Get those. I have a plastic pig, an egg timer, all kinds of goodies in here. The winning team gets to go in the loot bag. How exciting. Now, does everyone have the required equipment? Yes, another question. Go ahead.
Freestanding.
It has to be freestanding. Yeah, you can't tape it to the table. This is a good question. Anybody else have any? This team over here is handicapped, only 3 people. Oh, they're not playing. They're super handicapped.
I'm playing.
You're playing? Okay. And here's the kicker. You have 18 minutes starting now. Go! The marshmallow challenge.
the bottom is base.
Yes. Yes.
Marshmallow can't do the base.
Yes. Right. The height of the marshmallow. Yes, I guess I didn't make that clear. It's the height of the marshmallow off the table. The height of the marshmallow. Yes, that. It could be in the middle, so it's the marshmallow. Only 16 minutes. Only 16 minutes left. Yeah, the marshmallow off the table. Higher marshmallow.
But I'm not sure how we're going to build the platform without using the tape as a platform. I don't know how
Don't forget we have the string too.
Yeah, I have scissors somewhere. I didn't get the scissors. What do we do with this one?
Should we overlap with about a half inch?
Minutes left. Less than 15 minutes.
It's not
It's amazing how strategies yes, you got the string. You got the string if you want. I have scissors right here. Yeah.
I have a...
No more string.
so we need to resubstitute the string we have. You just knock it out.
Well, yes. So we can use 1 yard.
Okay, so
12 minutes left. 12 minutes.
Oh, entirely.
I know. Alright, where are we putting this?
Can we cut the string?
Yes, we cut the string. You just can't use one. The Marshmallow Challenge has been played by CEOs. It's been played by finance ministers.
Does it have to stand on the
Yes, it is. University professors played the Marshmallow Challenge. Administrators, wealthy men and women, high school teachers have played the Marshmallow Challenge. Lots of people play. There's systematic data about how people play. Wonderful prizes at stake. It's only 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left in the Marshmallow Challenge.
There we go. Well, we're going to use the last reinforce something here. Yeah. This should be well, yeah.
They're all normally I'm not.
The water cortex are probably making people hear your brain. I thought children
If we brace like this, it's going to work. If we brace it here, it's going to work. Well, equal makes the most sense for you holding it.
8 minutes left. 8 minutes. 8 minutes in the Rachel's Cafe Marshmallow Challenge. The Marshmallow wins. Free Dell, the glorious prize bag, hefty, filled with many important, exciting things. Yes, we have scissors. And one team stole them.
We won. We don't know where they are.
Yes. Oh,
Well, I have 6 seconds. 9 seconds on the river.
So it says join down to the end. Well, I'm my phone.
Just to stand up straight.
Here.
7 minutes.
Single.
Decide how high to go up. Someone can help us stabilize it. Figure out how far up.
What if we break up?
That would work.
How did 18 minutes go by so quickly?
No, wait. Oh, no, wait. Yes, but probably the lower this is used, the more stable the top. Actually, the most
Measuring the speed of doom.
in this
6 minutes. Oh dear.
now measure how high. That's the answer.
6
No,
minutes.
Ross. Straightness is how stable is. So straightness is Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, this lower part is going to be unstable. Actually, maybe if we put it that way. Once you start bending, once it starts to bend inward, it's stable. When you do it right,
You need just to put that marshmallow almost down. I don't know if you need to bind the leg or something.
yours is right there. Actually, this is pretty small. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
4.5 minutes.
I think lower is better. A little bit lower. So we need to just hold this. This needs to be straight.
Can we highlight this?
Okay, let's stop. If we go with
I'm very nervous. There's 4 minutes left. So much is at stake.
I lost my side here. Nobody hold
Well, we're tying it to the spaghetti. Tie it down to that so that whenever we have the
Three minutes, 15 seconds. It has to be standing when the bell rings. It has to be standing when the bell rings.
Okay, and nobody moves.
3 minutes. No one move. No one breathe.
Yeah.
none of them.
Doesn't look like much.
I think it's pretty awesome. That's the thing. We always trade off like height versus those.
As long as I beat Jim. The next step is we cut this catapults.
Here, this needs another race drive. It's not together.
Carl Sport. I was at your house.
I know you were, and then I didn't say
We're almost there, don't breathe. 60 seconds left.
That's only that table is like 5 seconds.
If it stands.
Yeah, good long. Good long. It's right in the middle. Right in the middle. Nice.
how much time do they have?
They have only 50 seconds. 5-0.
straighten this out. Yeah, real quick. Yeah, make it quite tight. Okay, let's pull it apart. One through side. Pull it apart. But you know what? This is wonderful. I love the fact that this.
3, 2, 1, step away. The spaghetti challenge is over. Marshmallow. And we have a winner. What's your guys' team name, by the way?
Team Awesome.
Team Awesome beat the Neurons by about 3 inches.
3 levels.
Therefore, these guys went for it all here. Go ahead, everyone gets 1 prize from the loot bag. Shirts, hats, and stupid things. Now, no, typically the winning heights are quite low. Alright, so what did we learn? Oh, look, it is standing. It's when you lower the height. You probably would have won. Yeah, you would have won. It didn't say yeah, you went for it all.
That was good though. So, hey, that's a triple level. Good job. Excellent.
Isn't that wonderful?
And then they added they take and added the last one.
So here's the deal on the Marshmallow Challenge. This is an exercise done by a guy named Tom Wupak. Or is it Wujak? I'm sorry. W-U-J-A-C. He has a wonderful TED Talk on this exercise that you should go look at. And if I could just summarize what we learned from him anyway, and then I have some of my own thoughts about it. One thing is that kindergartners outperform CEOs on this task. Can anyone tell me why? Why are kindergartners better at this?
They're more conservative.
They're more conservative in what sense? Yes? They iterate.
And they play with blocks all the time.
Yeah, and they don't plan. One of the main failures of CEOs is that they spend all of their time trying to become the president of Spaghetti Incorporated. And they spend their whole time doing that. And one of the findings that Wujak has found is that if you add an administrative assistant to any team of CEOs, their average height basically doubles. Just because they become more effective as a team. But to me, the essential finding here is the importance of trial and error, of failing, and of gradually iterating towards a better solution. So I was very impressed when the Neurons said, we have a little Eiffel Tower and we'll just stop here because based on our understanding of this material, we're not going to get anything higher. I think the best way, now that you guys have played it, what do you think is the best way to win? What sort of structure should you use? Anybody had architecture and knows?
Pyramid. You got interlocking triangles.
Interlocking triangles with circles.
Yeah.
It's like a rows of interlocking triangles. Actually, you could probably go up 6 feet in the air to hold them up. But the problem is most people don't think about the weight of the marshmallow and what it really means until the very end. And so what the CEOs and the professors typically do is they plan and they plan and they plan and they make structures and then they drop the marshmallow on it and it falls. So this is sort of what he's found. Here's what's interesting to me, okay, as a person. And I asked, was it Natalia? Is that your name? I asked Natalia what the body posture normally is for these science cafe talks. And those of you who teach at the university, and imagine what the typical posture is of a person who's watching someone else talk. If you're lucky, it's this. Usually, in my classes anyway, when I start the lecture, it becomes this. And then occasionally this. And if someone is like this, you don't trust them as a human being anymore. Something wrong with them. But every table during this exercise had people like this. Over nothing. Is there anything in the loot bag really worth that much? Like, what did you get? You got a bookmark, a Santa Claus, a plastic pig, oh, a nice...
Dog you.
a CD, a nice dog. Those are but everybody was like this, and I gotta do the thing. And all you really had was you're in a cafe and a maniac was walking around yelling there's 4 minutes left. So what is it about the brain? What gears were engaged then?
400 years of evolution.
Tell me about, yes, okay, so actually I have a point about evolution to make, but tell me how this was relevant to evolution, or how evolution
I guess
goes.
the same sort of myriad and undescribed systems that push me to stay fat and survive, you know, push me to
To do what?
succeed,
To succeed at, but to reach your goal at an arbitrary exercise. That's sort of strange. So what is it? There is something.
Well, it's competitiveness. It's hormones, competitiveness.
My brain doesn't know any difference between
Competition.
Your brain doesn't know any difference between this and...
brains are stupid.
Catching a mammoth.
There's an evolutionary basis for play, I would say. Yeah. Like you can play with your dog. You can't talk to your dog, you can play with your dog, right? So that's, yeah, I agree with you entirely. There's something deep down in there that's just dumb. And if you just put it in a goal environment, it gets all excited. And the reason people in education want to work on games is they're like, how can we leverage that to make people get excited about algebra, or the things that university professors study? And, you know, that's actually a difficult problem. I wish I could say that the Marshmallow Challenge could be translated to, like, analytical philosophy. But I don't know. You know, I'm an economist. I'm surprised at how entertained people can be by games of economies. You know, virtual currencies. It's amazing how people get motivated by supply and demand in that context.
Well, isn't it a competition too?
Well, and so what did that have to do? What if I just had one big group? Why is it that you were broken up into little groups and suddenly, I don't know if you noticed the little eyes darting. How big is the other guy's tower? You know, there's something evolutionary in that as well, I'm sure. But for me, you know, the thing really teaches something about motivation. Now, a second evolutionary point is the fact that these structures all look similar. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Well, evolution is not about reaching some arbitrary big standard point. It's about outperforming your competitor. Because then you gain fitness over everybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yet, there are what they call good tricks in evolution, right? Things that get invented in different places. And we saw some examples of that. I mean, look at Team Awesome and Team Neurons. You know, that's not, they're pretty similar in terms of their structure. Okay? So that's another thing that people in cognitive science can talk about. Or Peter Todd, I don't know if he's ever talked on this thing, he talks about that we have heuristics. We have little tools in our head that we pull out. And so for some reason, everybody pulls out Eiffel Tower for this one.
It's patternicity.
Patternicity. So that's a term I'm not familiar with, but I'd love to hear about that.
Patternicity is when you look at a cup and you think cup, and you don't think of all the other things it is. Container, object to throw, you know, loose memorandum, if you break it, all these other roles that you take on. You have a predefined object in your mind, the construct, which is a pattern. The Eiffel Tower, the triangular structures, you can go out.
Pyramids, I think somebody else said pyramids. So yeah, it may well be that we just have those things in our head, and when we think about this problem, holding a heavy weight above the ground, we think Eiffel Tower, pyramid, things like that. All right, so the last point I want to make, and kind of this is where I am now in terms of using games. I don't know what kind of narrative we have here. Some people just...
We were close. We needed one more piece.
This is Marshmallow Challenge overtime. So, you know, if you're really persistent, you can make it stand. I'll give you a Dell. And a free marshmallow. No, this is sort of where I am. It's a question of narrative. Games and narrative. We tend to think of games mostly in terms of mechanics. But lately I've been sort of dwelling on this phrase that's come to mind, which is that the desire to learn is the soul of education. So all the folks say, let's use games to make people teach. And I sort of think, no game will ever work if the student doesn't want to actually learn. So the desire to learn, what can the narrative of a game contribute to learning? You know, because we're putting people in a game-like exercise already. Grades, scores, comparisons, competition, teamwork, individual, you know, time limited. That's all in the university already. But maybe what we've lost is the story. Thank you.
Well,
How do you differentiate between playing games and puzzle solving?
A puzzle is a game with one dominant strategy. So in other words, when you figure out how to play a puzzle, it's not interesting anymore. Because that's not my definition. There's a wonderful game designer at Carnegie Mellon called Jesse Schell. And he's written a book about that. And oh, but you still win.
That's right.
This is the theory group. These guys took like 10 minutes to but there are some interesting distinctions here between toys, puzzles, and games.
The reason I'm asking is I'm becoming more and more convinced that I'm a physical scientist, and I'm becoming more and more convinced that the best people I know that do this type of work like solving puzzles. And it's not the learning the trick to solve it, it's the idea of this is a puzzle and I want to solve it. Tomorrow I have a different puzzle, next week I'll have a third puzzle, but I am motivated to solve those. I can go home and feel happy with myself for having solved a teeny tiny puzzle today that prevented me from doing something yesterday.
I think that's very powerful. Adding mystery and investigation to our classrooms, I think, adds a lot of interest. I'm interested also, though, in the narrative behind the puzzle. Does a puzzle need a narrative? No, I don't know. I mean, look at like the most abstract puzzles
Yeah,
that we have.
in my work it fits into the narrative, but it doesn't have one in and of itself usually.
Yeah. The only narrative I can think of is like one's own personal advancement, you know, the feeling that I've achieved, I've solved. Yeah.
If I may, there's one major difference between games and, say, the university system. The university system, and I'm not about real life and not real life, because people already argue that's somewhat arbitrary. It's punitive. See, when you screw up in, say, a game like World of Warcraft, which I have not played, when you screw up in a game like World of Warcraft, you get to try again. And you can still be one of the top, whatever. When you go to university, there's something about letting you know how much you suck.
Yeah.
I've been told by my supervisors to make sure to let my students know how much they suck.
Well, there is actually a lot of research saying that games really only work when they're safe. So if you go to make a game in a classroom, I would not advise you to make the points in the game contribute to the grade. I did that one semester, and there were death threats over how people were playing the game. You know, how dare you do that move when I was doing this, and then we could have both scored more points. I'm going to kill you, right? And it was over 2 points in a 1,000-point course. So safety is very, very critical in unlocking these things. The fact that it was silly is not a distraction, it's actually essential. And people in Silicon Valley say that the best way to start businesses these days is to fail often, fail quickly. I don't know how that works in the educational context. What if we said, anyone can go to the top program and just give it a shot and they can retake the course, fail, fail, fail until they finish. That's sort of what these massively open online courses are like. It's just, we're the Stanford artificial intelligence agents, professors, and we're just going to release this coursework and anyone can take it. And of course, we will only hire people who score 100% on the test the first time they look at it. But everybody else can try.
It's comical that in our free, we call it this capitalistic economy where every, let's
pronounce America.
In our America, we have this free economic system which some number of our politicians, espouse, and yet that's not what we have in our education system. Which you said, people can actually just compete with the best that comes out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me to rethink the university as if it were a virtual world. And people, on the model of these online games, and people would come in and they'd receive a narrative that's sort of Harry Potter-ish. And even, give them the trappings. Here's your robe, here's your wand. Everyone gets an owl or whatever, whatever that's in that book. And then you just tell people, yeah, you can keep trying anything you want, and we'll just honestly say pass, fail, and through that story, you don't know what kind of motivations we might awaken in people who right now Here's the experiment I'm running in my class this semester. I'm trying to, I've created the final exam as the monster. And I showed it to them on the first day. I said, we're going to have a pre-test. It's going to test your game literacy. And they took it. I made sure it was horrible. It was so hard, so incredibly hard. I said, but it's not going to be graded. And then I collected it and I said, that's the final exam. My job is to help you get there. And so in that moment, I'm hoping to become their Gandalf. And break down the barrier that they're, you know, you're up here to kill me. No, no. The monster you face is already done. I have nothing to do with it. But I can help you overcome the monster, and we'll see how that goes. But that's just an example of trying to build in this narrative that is a little bit different from the dog-eat-dog competition narrative, the Horatio Alger narrative that we kind of have everybody in.
What's the point? Are we making better people? Is that the idea of the system? We're trying to create the best people we can, not competition to find out who is the best. You take someone and you find how to make them as good as they can be.
Well, there are some very cynical models of education that say really our only purpose is to discover innate ability, that we don't actually contribute anything. It's a cynical model, but it's out there. And then the other model, obviously, is that we take people and make them better. But I don't know about you guys, but my students at Indiana University, a significant fraction of them are not interested in getting better. And I think at that point it's pretty much hopeless. There's no point in. And so then, but then I fall back on this idea of why aren't they interested? And can't I tell a story that would make them understand, you know, what the future holds and why it might matter?
Well, you said creating safer environment would encourage people to learn, but it's not how evolution works. Actually, creating less safer environment where there is more selective pressure creates more change.
Well, that's if it depends on what part of the brain we're energizing. If we're bringing the raw survival instinct forward, I agree. But we were talking here about engaging the play mechanism, so that's why you would do safety. But that's the only reason you would do safety, right? Safety is just try it out in practice, and you won't die. But the other way, like there are two ways. Look, you can have a spider that has 1 billion babies, and they all die. That's one way to do evolution. But we mammals, we don't have 1 billion babies, so we can't just take our babies and say, here comes Tiger, go! You know, and see which ones survive. So we developed this play thing to say, Daddy's the tiger, rawr! And teach it. Okay, so I think that's the distinction there, but not being a cognitive scientist in the area of evolution, I can't say much more.
Some professors, their lives were changed by doing their first online, international, opening it up to anyone, and they've actually set themselves up in the universities to continue doing that, including with other, like a couple of them started their own, or helped start one.
Was it Coursera or whatever?
Yeah, and then there was another one too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them popping up because they find people around the world, even though only about 4 to 5% actually finish their class. They find that people around the world are energized at being able to take these that have and that's the people that helps re-energize the professors. So there's a lot of professors that, just the thought of having 100,000 people in their class
who actually want to do this,
yes.
Who actually want to know what's in your brain.
It's all voluntary. There's no credit for it.
So I don't know. When I look at the university, I think about the volunteerism that might have been present 100 years ago. I don't know. Did people in the Victorian era, when they went to school, they were all, I'm going to become a learned person. I mean, were they really thinking that way? I don't know. If you look at the architecture, it seems to me there are two kinds of fantasies that university architecture holds to. One is the old medieval Ivy thing. You got plenty of that here. And the other is science fiction. You build buildings that try to look like spaceships. And so that makes me think that maybe back in the day, there was this effort to create these stories, and that people not here have that vision in their heads. Instead of the streets paved with gold, it's the great towers of learning. And if you've walked around a modern university, ha! Towers of learning, that's so funny. But, for someone in Malaysia, it is a wonderful dream. And that sort of says, maybe our job is to be, we should spin this dream. It's a dream. It's like The Music Man. The musical? Right? Yeah, and you just go around and you say, I'm going to teach them about science. And they don't really learn a whole lot about science, but you build the myth. And then it carries on, and their kids and everything. Then we have a culture that loves intellectualism instead of hates it. I don't know. I'm starting to speculate a little bit. Getting outside of scientific balance. I just want everybody to know more about games. That's really what I think would help the world right now. Go to Game Preserve down here on the square and go to Common Room Games at 10th and the Bypass and pick up board games that are sharp and hard to learn. So that you stop playing the games you've always been playing that aren't very hard. Right? You give yourself hard movies and hard music and hard. Give yourself some hard games to play. Okay? Thank you very much for your attention.